Well, the idea is like this, coming back to the topic, that you can see a lot of ideas, a lot of theories, a lot of concepts, a lot of frameworks circling around strategy, circling so much to the point where strategy becomes confusing. So you know what happens. If you read a book, you'll see that the author has a certain core idea of the book, or several core ideas, but they need to highlight that. So it seems that strategy is about the ideas that they are presenting in the book. If you look at an academic, you know, a business school professor or lecturer at least, they need to be tenured to be allowed to teach. So they need to come with a novelty. So their novelty becomes suddenly the focus point of their concept and of their view about strategy. If you're a practitioner, you need to focus on some effective actions, and those effective actions are becoming somehow your view about what strategy is. Now, all these views may be correct, and they might be fine, but in the majority of the cases, they are incomplete. And because they are incomplete, it creates a problem. It creates a problem of integration, of an integrated view. So this is what happens. We are surrounded and drowned in all sorts of concepts and ideas and theories and book titles and frameworks and things that people are throwing at us and telling us that this is strategy. This is our view of strategy. It might be the best one possible. And this is actually this is crazy. This is crazy because you can't really figure out what to do and how to understand strategy and what strategy is and how it works if you try to look at all these sometimes very divergent views about strategy. So this is not good. This is not good, and you can understand that strategy becomes or it's regarded as something difficult. So why is strategy difficult? Well, first of all, because all this, you know, salad of partial views which are thrown at us as intended to be some complete views on strategy, and they are not complete views on strategy. They're only partial views of strategy, and some of them may be correct. Some of them are less than correct. So the biggest issues that I see about strategy is how to make it easier rather than difficult. And there is only one way forward, and the way is to make a selection of the essential elements of strategy and be able to assemble them in a logical and clear workflow. And workflow is a magic word here, because you need to understand where do you start, where do you end in formulating a strategy, and then where do you start and when do you end in implementing the strategy. And all this needs to be clear. So my suggestion is, let us clear this mess, and we will just go through several steps, trying to understand what is really important and how can be organized in a workflow in regards to strategy. How do we see and how do we use strategy? Okay, so we need our target is to have a crystal clear approach to strategy and understanding strategy in a very logical and very simple and straightforward way. So I think that the first thing to get to is the fact that strategy is our response to some future challenges. We might have a variety of challenges, a variety of types of challenges ahead. They might be related to customers, they might be related to competitors, it might be related to changing regulatory environment. It might be there might be some challenges related to a variety of things. And why are they challenges? They are challenges because they cannot be surmounted. We cannot go beyond those challenges. We can't solve those challenges with what we have today. With the type of business that we're doing today, with the kind of business, with the processes, with the current targeting of customers, with the value propositions that we have today, if we change nothing and we just try to improve what we have, we might not be able to surmount those challenges. So we need a strategy, and the strategy means about doing different things than we do today, or doing the same things but in significantly different ways. So That's a strategy, and we need to figure out what the strategy should be to better allow us to surmount those challenges that we see ahead. And challenges might be positive or negative. They might be about opportunities that are coming in the future, and we would like to harvest the benefits of those opportunities, or there might be some threats, something bad that might happen, and we need to be able to mitigate those threats and have the solutions to deal with those threats and not allow them to have a negative impact upon our organization. And so this is the story about challenges. We start the strategy from understanding which are the challenges that lay ahead for our organization, and we try to build a strategy to better surmount them, rather than continuing to do the business as usual as we do today. Okay, so what comes next? After we have clarified which the challenges are, we need to make some choices, because strategy is about choices. The choices that we make, the strategic choices, if you like, are the foundation of our strategy. So we make some choices and then say, okay, these are our choices. If we translate those choices into reality, they are choices about doing different things or about things in a significantly different way, and if we translate them into the reality, into the reality of the marketplace, and they become part of our new strategy, then yeah, we have a way forward to develop the strategy. So we start from challenges. We create the foundation for our strategy based on some important choices that we make about doing different things or doing things differently, and then we move forward from here. So what would be the next step after we have selected some choices for our strategy? We need to understand how to translate them into the market or marketplace reality, and that is done through value propositions. Value propositions are our solutions for some customer jobs to be done, for some issues that we are addressing, and because we're providing a good solution, and we are successful in addressing those needs, then those are successful value propositions. So this is our value proposition. This is our proposal to solve certain things in a different way, ideally in a differentiating way, in a competitive environment, and that is a translation of our choices into something concrete, into something plausible, something that is represented by the value proposition. And value proposition is not equal to product. Value proposition is more than just a product, more than just a service. It's about the channels that we use to deliver this to the customer. It's about the partners, the ecosystem. It's about a variety of things, about business model and things like this. So value proposition is a complex thing, and it translates our strategic choices into reality. And we might have several value propositions, not only one, that are helping us translate our strategic choices that we have selected for surmounting the identified future challenges. So that's how things work. Now, the fact is that we have some choices. We just painting them on a whiteboard. We say, okay, this is just the ideas. Now, how do we translate it into reality? We define some value propositions that are helping us bring those choices to the reality of the marketplace. And okay, then what is needed to be able to do that? Because those value propositions might use some competencies or processes or relationships or infrastructures that we don't have. We didn't need that until today. We didn't need those competencies. They were not necessary for the ways that we did business until today. Those processes we never did. Those activities we never did because we didn't need it to until today. So these are some new things that we need to have in place. We need to have some capabilities, competencies, know-how, relationships, channels, a variety of other things that we don't have. Some of them we do, but they're not in the right configuration, maybe, or not at the right maturity level. So we certainly need to focus on what needs to happen to support those value propositions, because otherwise they would be as as let's say theoretical as our choices. We need to have capabilities to be able to support those value propositions. They don't need just to be announced to the market. These are our value propositions where we need to be able to deliver those products and to those within that business model, with those processes, together with the partners that we have in an ecosystems and so on. So we need to build those capabilities or to adjust those capabilities that we already have into the required configuration to be able to support our value propositions, the essential elements of our value proposition. So those are capabilities. We define them. Now we have a full system of capabilities and value propositions supported by those capabilities, value propositions that have some essential elements that translates our choices into the reality of the market. We might say that, yeah, strategies, it's now the strategy is clear. So we started from challenges. How do we address those challenges? We make some very clear choices. We translate those choices into value propositions and define the essentials of those value propositions. And then we understand what capabilities are required, what must be in place in order for those value propositions to be fully supported. And that's it. Well, that's not it, because still that it's something that we declare and we clarified and we identified what needs to be done, but we haven't done anything. So the question is, can we do that tomorrow morning? Can we have our strategy producing results tomorrow morning? So why not? Well, why not? Because those capabilities are things that are typically complex, and there are many, and they might take months or years to be able to actually have in place, to set them in place. So therefore, we need to implement the strategy. And implementing the strategy is to understand which are the gaps between the capabilities that we had until today, corresponding to what kind of business did we do until today, and the capabilities required to support our new strategy, the essentials of our new value proposition, the translation to reality of our strategic choices that we have selected because we need to surmount certain challenges that we understand that lay ahead. So we need to understand which are the gaps that we need to close in our capabilities system, because if we close those gaps, and obviously that won't happen by tomorrow morning, it will happen again in months or years, then we would have our strategy implemented. The capabilities will become real. They will support our value propositions. Those value propositions are actually empowering the strategic choices that we made, and we would be able to surmount the challenges that we have identified. So the closing of the gaps represents the actionable part of our strategy. So we need to understand what systems might we build, what new ecosystem or what new sales channel we need to develop that we never needed before. Maybe we want to go from business to business to business to consumer, if those are the choices that we made. And of course, we don't have the necessary channels for that. We need to build them, we need to develop, we need to plug into some ecosystems. We need to gather some competencies that we might need to run some new processes that require new competencies. We might need to gather some know-how and knowledge about the market, about new technologies that we might be using. So all these are gaps that we need to close. And of course, we need to have a schedule of and a sequencing of how do we close those gaps, because that needs to follow a certain logic and interdependencies between those capabilities. Okay, so I think that we have a clear understanding of the strategy, where it starts from, what is the foundation of the strategy, what needs to be done to translate our choices, the foundation of our strategy, into reality, what are the capabilities required for us to support some new value propositions that are representing the way forward according to our strategy, and then finally to be able to focus on exactly what needs to be done, the actions to close the gaps, because that will bring our capabilities into a practical reality, being able to actually support our value propositions in the marketplace, and then to see how our choices went. Now, I don't want to go there, because we have a separate topic for tomorrow, which says that all these steps, all of them, are based on hypotheses about the future. And strategies about the future. It's about tomorrow, it's about next month, next year, things where we need to anticipate how they might change. We need a certain level of foresight, of understanding of what the consequences of the changes that we're making might be. Now, the bad news is that some of those hypotheses are always wrong. It's impossible to use only correct and valid hypotheses about the future. That's a characteristic of the future. It never happens in the ways that we anticipate. It always changes. We are in a complex world on a complex planet, so things are happening in different ways. So we will need to adapt our strategy according to what we discover to be valid or invalid hypotheses. But again, this is a topic that we are going to discuss in a separate slot in the third day of the summit tomorrow. Okay, so that's I think it's a more clear representation of the strategy, and if we can focus on all these elements, we can have a better understanding of how to work in a workflow that allows us to go from steps to step in a logical way and be able to use the output from one step as an input to the next step and go on until we have a strategy. And sometimes we need to validate our strategy before we start implementing it, which means that we might need to go again through the same. I've designed it here as a sequence, a horizontal sequence of steps, but in reality it's a cycle. So we might need to go from 5 again to 1 or to 2 and to make multiple iterations of our strategy until it becomes something feasible and viable as the end result of implementing it. But in the end, we'll end up with something that we believe that it's an appropriate, feasible, and viable strategy, and we start implementing. And implementing means about closing the gaps. It's step number 5. So that's the workflow for the strategy, and I think that we brought it to some simple enough things that can be understood, that allow us to filter out what is needed for each of these steps, what theories and what the concepts and what frameworks are needed for each of these steps, in order to be able to put them in a logical way to put our ducks in a row and be able to end up with a strategy that is appropriate for dealing with the challenges that we are anticipating that our organization is going to meet. Okay, so now there are some things that result from this, and one example is about the so-called emergent strategy. Strategy is something that emerges. We don't really need to figure out the strategy from early on. We just need to wait for things to happen, and we'll figure out what the opportunities are, and we'll define some strategy. And we have some sort of initial, very approximate and vague strategy to start with, and then we'll figure out as we go along what the strategy will be, and it will be emerging. Well, I can't figure how this can work in reality. Strategy needs to start from a deliberate strategy. Again, we're using hypotheses about the future. That's essential to understanding why it's not an emergent strategy. And then we need to adapt, because some of those hypotheses that we're employing to build our deliberate strategy will turn out not to be valid, not to be correct. So we need to adapt our strategy, and of course, in the end, we won't have the same strategy as we have initially. Let's say that we're implementing a strategy over a time frame, a strategic horizon of 4 years, and in the last year, in the 4th year, we'll have a strategy that we're implementing, the last parts of the strategy that we're implementing, which is different from the strategy that we had at the beginning of year 1. As our deliberate strategy. In the meantime, it got adapted, and yes, we are implementing in the end a different strategy, but waiting it to emerge somehow from what the market teaches us, and not really start with a very clear and comprehensive deliberate strategy. That is a trap. And that is a trap of undecision, of insufficiently clear decision that we need to start with when we formulate a strategy. And this is what happens. Take a look at the diagram. So what we have here in the upper part, it's actually the strategic analysis. We need to figure out what the trends, the weak signals, and therefore, by understanding what are the challenges that we cannot surmount if we go ahead with what we have today and we change nothing, then we identify the paramount challenges that lay ahead, which require us to have a strategy. Now, this is in the context of some wider picture, the macro environment, which it's including some driving forces with a significant level of uncertainty. Typically, this happens in the macro environment. We're talking about politics, we're talking about economics, demographics, evolution of technology, the environment, and so on. So these are things that might evolve in significantly different directions, positive or negative. So scenario planning allows us to select a number of plausible alternatives of the future. And this is, again, the bigger picture within which we develop our strategy. And what results is actually a number of constraints that we apply to our strategy and allow us to build a deliberate strategy, again, using a number of hypotheses about the future. That's the only ways that we can plan about the future. We can think about doing changes in the future. That deliberate strategy needs to cope with all the alternative plausible futures described by the scenarios. So our strategy, we can't start with a strategy that is very good in one scenario, but is very bad in another scenario. So what are we going to do if that very bad scenario is going to prevail, to represent the ways that things are going to evolve? And we will have a bad strategy, so we can't afford that. So we need to start with a strategy that initially takes into consideration some viable outcomes, irrespective of what scenario will prevail. So this is why the scenario planning presents our strategy with some constraints, and we need to take those into consideration when we formulate our strategy. Okay, so then we go, of course, and we said we implement our strategy. We close all those strategic gaps. We will have step by step the capabilities set in place, and we'll be able to bring to the market the value propositions that we've designed, and that will represent the bringing to reality of our strategic choices, and we will be in a better position to deal with the challenges that we have identified. Okay, so we will have an implemented strategy in the end. And of course, as I said, some of the hypotheses will turn out to be invalid. Our fully implemented strategy at the end of the strategic horizon, after we have finished doing all those, closing all those gaps and implementing and launching into the market all those value propositions, then we will only have the valid hypothesis as part of our implemented strategy. Why? Because we have filtered out the invalid hypotheses in the meantime. And this is how it's happening. So as we execute our strategy or implement our strategy, we need to adapt it because we will have some validation of our hypothesis, and we will find out that some of the hypotheses that we have employed when we have formulated the strategy turn out to be invalid. Sometimes we even have an early warning system, which is actually monitoring all those hypotheses related to the external environment, the parameters of the external environment, and telling us, hey, that inflation rate that you anticipated is not going within the limits that you have used as a hypothesis. So you need to that hypothesis is invalid. So you need to change that hypothesis, change accordingly the strategy, see what depended on that hypothesis, and maybe change your choices or the value propositions or the capabilities required, whatever is needed to be able to take into consideration the reality that actually showed us that some of those hypotheses are invalid. And guess what? Some of those hypotheses are also related to the challenges themselves, which again is the starting point of our strategy. So we might need to partially reformulate, go back and partially reformulate the strategy, because even the challenges themselves, the opportunities and the threats that we anticipated, didn't turn out to to present themselves in the ways that we anticipated. So therefore, we might need even to update our challenges, and as a consequence, we will update some of the choices, some of the value proposition essentials, and the capabilities required, and some gaps to be closed. And we're continuously adapting our strategy along its implementation or execution, and we try to keep it as closer to the reality as possible. But we have a strategy that we're implementing. We have a plan, a series of strategic plans to implement parts of the strategy in sequence, and we're doing that. And in the end, of course, we'll have an implemented strategy. But guess what? Just to add more complexity to the image, we also have some changes, some hypotheses that are going to even affect the larger picture of the macro environment, and the scenarios might change, or at least the least that can happen. It's one of the 3 or 4 or 5 scenarios will become prevalent. One of them becomes that plausible alternative of reality becomes the reality itself. So therefore, we'll have a prevailing scenario out of the several scenarios that we have designed, we have imagined, defined in our scenario planning process, and therefore even the constraints related to the updated scenarios will affect the strategies that we might take into consideration by understanding that the scenarios have changed, or even taking into consideration the fact that one of the scenarios becomes the prevalent one, the ones that represents the true evolution of those driving forces that were very uncertain in the first place. So this is a way to deal with strategy. We start from a deliberate strategy. We do an analysis of what might happen. We create an image of the future in which we will be able to surmount the paramount challenges that we have anticipated based on the possible opportunities and threats, and we've built some scenarios about the larger pictures of plausible alternatives, and then we start implementing, because we have a lot of work to do to close those gaps and have the capabilities that allow us to launch the value proposition into the market and to turn our strategic choices from the whiteboard, from theory, from concept to reality. So we will have that strategy implemented. Okay, so that's the story. That's the story, and you can understand now why expecting there will be some sort of emergent strategy brought into our heads, maybe from heaven or from God knows where, is not a way to deal with strategy. We need to have a deliberate strategy based on the best understanding, on the best guesses, on the best hypothesis that we have created. We need to start implementing that strategy, and of course, as we implement it, we realize that some of those hypotheses were not valid. And we need to replace that part of the strategy, reformulate it in some maybe change some choices, or some value propositions, or some capabilities required, and so on. So that's a way to deal with strategy. Strategy needs to be adaptive, needs to be deliberate. And of course, we will have an implemented strategy that will be different from the ones that we formulated initially in response to what we learn about the reality and the effects of the changes we're producing, about other changes that are not produced by us, but they happen in the environment of our organization, and that's how we deal with strategy. Okay, so what about the integrative way? We said that from the very beginning that it's an iterative process, it's an adaptive process, and it is to be integrative. Well, integrative means some of the things that we've discussed, but let's put them in some sort of a diagram. You see here a cycle. Now that those steps that you have seen initially are put into a circle. They're not really corresponding 1 to 1 and 2 to 2 and so on, but these are some steps that we need to go through when we formulate a strategy, and they are put in a cycle because, remember, it might be an iterative process. We need to go and formulate a strategy, go through some validation gateway in the end, and say, is it feasible and viable? our strategy. And if it's not feasible and viable, we need to go back and redesign our strategy until we believe that it's a feasible strategy, something that we can do. We can cope with the changes that are mandated by the strategy, and also the results, the business model, and the value propositions that we bring to the market are going to be viable, at least from the financial point of view. Okay, but also to be sustainable. So look at this cycle. So first of all, we need to do some strategic analysis. And strategic analysis, now it has some fancy name about being a spyglass about the future. And yeah, that's what we do. We look into the future, try to create an image, identify the paramount challenges related to the future opportunities and threats that we identify. Based on those paramount challenges, we need to say, okay, so how are going to surmount them? So let's make some choices about that. And we make some choices, our strategic choices, we put them on a whiteboard, and that's fine. We say this combination of choices will allow us to surmount those paramount challenges. And those choices are not really something that we just scratch our head about, okay, what the choices might be. Hopefully, we do have available some sort of reference model, a cognitive reference model that says, okay, there are a number of choices available to you. Make some logic related to those paramount challenges, some logical decisions, and identify the choices that we will select from a library of choices, and those will represent our positioning, our strategic positioning, and based on those choices we can create the strategy. So and then of course we go to the activity systems, which are representing the essential representation of the value propositions that bring our strategic choices to reality. We look into the capability system. So what capabilities must be in place to be able to turn those value propositions into the reality of the services and products that we're selling into the marketplace. And then once we have understood that, we go to look at the gaps that we have to close. We schedule them. We need to understand that there is a causality that allows us to sequence the gaps, which gaps are going to close first and which gaps are going to close later, and which are going to be closed last. So we break them down. We break them down because we need to be able to implement, when we'll see that implementing requires us to have some sort of, let's say, year one, our strategies to be implemented over a couple of years. So we'll have some gaps that we're going to close in year one, and in second year we're going to close other gaps, and so on. So we go to this last stage of validation. It's a validation gateway. And if everything is fine, then of course we will be able to go further to implement our strategy. But before we do that, we remember that we had some scenarios that describes a larger picture, and this based on the uncertainties and our strategic analysis. It's defining not just the trends and weak signals, which allow us to identify the paramount challenges and a variety of other things, but they also help this strategic analysis helps us identify the critical uncertainties, and based on those critical uncertainties, we feed that into the scenario planning process, and we get some scenarios, and those scenarios are going to represent some constraints for our strategy. We can't select any choices. We need to select those choices which will make sense in all scenarios. So irrespective of which scenario will prevail, our choices will need to be valid. Of course, we can change them when we remember the adaptation process also regards the scenarios. And when one scenario is prevailing, we can go back and modify our choices to be better adapted to that prevailing scenario. But initially, our strategic choices needs to be valid irrespective of which scenario will prevail. Okay, so that's scenario planning added to the process of strategy formulation. And of course, when we believe that our strategy is feasible and the outcome of implementing it is viable, we can go on to strategy execution and to implement the strategy. And this where the breakdown of the gaps to close becomes very handy, because typically we have 1 year strategy execution cycles. And it's 1 year because it's based on strategic planning, on aligning the strategic plans throughout the organization, bringing it to the individual level, integrating the strategy with the budget and with the operational planning, doing some external alignment if needed with our customers or with our suppliers. And we need to build all that aligned, organizationally integrated strategic plans that we implement. And as we implement it, guess what? We'll find out that some of our hypotheses that we have used when we formulated our strategy turn out to be invalid. Some of them are always invalid. We just don't know which ones will turn out to be invalid in the future. So as we implement our strategy, we find out that some of the hypotheses are invalid. Some of the signposts related to scenarios are showing us that one of the scenarios is heading towards becoming the prevalent scenario. And we even have an early warning system that tells us, hey, something happens that contradicts some of your hypotheses. So go back and change the part of the strategies that depended on those hypotheses. And all this is an adaptation. It's an adaptation process that goes back into the strategy formulation, and we need to do whenever needed, at least once a year. We need to go back and reformulate part of our strategy. And this is something that always happens, because always some of the hypotheses that we're using when we formulate our strategy will turn out to be invalid. Okay, so that's a process. This is a cycle, strategy formulation and strategy execution. This is an integrated cycle of strategy together with scenario and with the adaptations that goes along the strategy implementation. And then just to help us make better choices, we also need to have experimentation. And experimentation, it's something that has a life of its own. It doesn't follow necessarily the strategy formulation cycle or the strategy implementation. It's just something that we do. We experiment with products. We have the design thinking methodology available. And we need to continuously experiment with new ideas, some new technologies emerging. So let's see how it works if we actually redesign our products using the new technology and see what the market provides us as feedback about this new proof of concept for a new product. So we need to do this continuously. And as we learn that, for instance, the customers that we're targeting, or maybe some even new customers, are interested about some new development in the product space, in the maybe new products, new services, then we can incorporate that into the reference, into the cognitive reference model. We are able to improve the library or the catalog of choices that are available to us, which allows us, anytime we pass through stage 2 of selecting choices or updating the choices, we'll have a better reference to be able to make better choices. So that's the purpose of the product experimentation. But then choices are more about more than product. Choices may be about the channels that we're using, the geographies that we're targeting, the ecosystems that we're developing. They are about a variety of things. Can we validate? Can you repeat the question? I'll get back to that. So choices experimentation is about experimenting with choices that we never used before. And we need to make some limited experimentation about any new choices that we never use from our catalog of choices, and get a better understanding whenever we need to select a certain type of choice. Have we experimented with that choice? Yes, we did, and the feedback was positive. Or no, unfortunately, the feedback wasn't positive for that kind of approach to certain types of customers. So we will make better choices whenever we pass through stage 2. And remember that stage 2 is not just initially the initial iterative formulation of the strategy. It might be later on when we need to reformulate our strategy because we need to adapt it. So that's where the continuous ongoing experimentation with new products and new choices that we never used before comes handy. and it goes with a life of its own in parallel with our strategy cycle of formulation, execution, adaptation, and reformulation. So that's how this works. So let's go to the questions. Just a quick note for those interested to dig deeper into what has been presented here. There is a live course. Actually, the next edition starts in 2 weeks, in February 10. And you go just to explaining-strategies.com, and you'll find all the details about it there. So let's go to the questions. And Abdul, can you help me with the question? I think there were at least 2 questions that have been asked, and I would like to answer them. They vanished from my screen, so I don't remember what the questions were.
I'll read it out. Shall I read now?
Yeah, go on.
So, how can we validate strategy with the customers / market? That is one question.
Okay, let me answer this one first, and just hold on to the next. So first of all, there is this concept of strategy testing, and I'm sure that you've seen it because there are some reputable academics which are saying that actually we should be able to test our strategy before we implement it. Well, let me tell you this. Just about this topic about validating our strategy with the customers before implementing it. Strategy means a lot of changes that we need to do in regards ultimately to the capabilities that we need to have in place. So in order to do even the smallest test of our strategy, we need to use some capabilities that we never had before, some processes that we never had, some competencies that we never had, some relationships maybe with ecosystem partners that we never had before. So we need to do all that. We need to implement those capabilities. And again, that takes months and years until we succeed to do that. We can't really do some sort of quick testing as we do with the product. You know, we create a mock-up of our product, some minimum viable product, and bring it to a number of friendly customers and say, what do you see about this new product, about these new user interface, about this new technology that we're using? And if you like it, we turn this mock-up product into a full product. We can't do that with strategy because the mock-up of our strategy is actually our strategy with all the capabilities, all the strategic gaps that are closed in order to be able to have the strategy and to be able to test it. So in other words, testing our strategy is the same thing as implementing it. So we can't really test strategy itself. What we can test are some concepts and ideas and information that we use as part of the strategy formulation. And you remember the strategy experimentation. So we experiment using design thinking with some new products. Not really about strategy is not about one product, or not even about a category of products. It's about the concepts that represent the foundation of some new products that we including the value proposition. So unlike in design thinking, which is about creating new products, we're using the product experimentation to understand the type of product, the types of matches between solutions and jobs to be done for customers, and understands that kind of types of solutions, not just one product. So that's a little more complex than just simple design thinking for being able to do something before we launch a product. So we need to do that kind of testing, but it's a testing that has a life of its own that goes in parallel with our strategy. Our strategy does not depend on the finishing of some product testing, because we need to formulate our strategy. We can't wait with the strategy to be formulated until we have some products tested. That goes with the life of its own, but all the results that we've been able to accumulate based on product testing or even on strategic choices testing, we're going to embed them in the cycle of strategy formulation at the time when we do formulate our strategy, or every year, at least every year, when we will need to reformulate part of the strategy. In the meantime, if we succeeded to get some knowledge, some knowledge about some product types or attributes of new technologies that we can embed, of course we are going to use them in reconsidering some of the strategic choices, some of the new value propositions whenever we pass through formulation or reformulation of our strategy. So testing, we need to do testing as much as possible, but it's not in between strategy formulation and strategy implementation. It's something that goes along all this cycle, and as it produces valuable information, it's embedded, and the next time when we pass through the cycle of formulation, initial formulation of, or strategy reformulation. So that's about the how do we test strategy with the customers, at least along the lines of what I have presented today. Abdul, do you have a second question?
Second question is again from Marina. So my company was a Scottish startup which raised 60 million through Series A and B, but offer was not validated, and we were not able to generate customers. Check was high. So this was the context. Yeah.
Well, what can I say? Very, I feel very bad for the investors. Well, the investors were supposed to look at the strategy, not just as a business plan, as a strategy, and say, okay, what is your strategy? First of all, which are the challenges that you're building to, you're addressing with your strategy? If you're a startup, you still have some challenges, and you can imagine as a startup, you have the challenges of validating that you have some valuable value propositions, that you are accepted in the market, that you are going to be able to compete with the incumbents, that you have some novelties that is not just hype, but it's something that goes along some trends in the market. So there are some challenges that you need to build a strategy for that, and the strategy means about what kind of choices are we going to select in order to deal with those challenges, what value propositions are going to translate those strategic choices into the reality, what capabilities and all that. And this needs to be presented to the investors in the most transparent way, and they should be able to participate in the feasibility of validation and in the viability validation of the end product and of the end business models that you're going to implement, and only then to start financing something. You don't have the big pockets of Google or of Amazon to be able to just throw all sorts of things into the market, and if they succeed, then they are successful products, new products of Google or Amazon. If they fail, that's not a problem, and the majority of them fail. You as a startup, or even if you raised all those millions from the investors, you might not have deep enough pockets to be able to just launch something, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll try with the next one, and maybe we'll be successful with the next product or value proposition that we'll launch into the market. You don't have that luxury. Google and Amazon, they don't have strategies. If you say, well, what's the strategy of Amazon? What's the strategy of Google? They have no strategy at all. The only strategies they have is big pockets that allows us to throw into the market every year or every second year some new products, some new ideas, some new Google glasses, some new stuff. And if they succeed, they succeed. And yeah, that's great for the business. It maybe launches a new business line that turns out to increase their revenue stream with another couple of billions every year. But you're not Google, you're not Amazon. You don't have that luxury. You need to create a very clear strategy, identify as well as possible the challenges, which are the choices that are going to position you in the best way possible to deal with those challenges. How do you translate those challenges into the right value propositions? And then understand what is needed in terms of capabilities and how we're going to implement that. And always be on the look for the invalid hypothesis. When you have got the $60 million, you use some hypothesis about the future. Just said, well, we invest 60 million and we get, I don't know, $1 billion or something like this, or whatever the outcome was expected to be. But that is about a bunch of hypotheses about the future. And that's why the strategy needs to be continuously on the watch out for the invalid hypothesis, because some of those hypotheses that investing that amount of money into a new business, the hypothesis used for that, are always invalid. something always is wrong. You don't know initially what is wrong and what is going to be turn out to be valid. So you need to continuously watch for what is turn out to be valid, adapt your strategy, and continuously become synchronized with the reality, and continue implementing something that will lead you to the outcome desired. So that's the approach. If you don't take that approach, it's just a gamble. You're gambling with the investors' money, and sometimes investors have sufficient money to be able to gamble with them. But you're also gambling with the life of your employees, and with the image that you have in the marketplace, and with the reputation that you have as an investor, as an entrepreneur. So it's better to have a clear strategy on how you're going to do all that.